All right, welcome to another F.L.O.W Presents. This is our third installment in our financial series. In week one, we did a general overview of finance and kind of what money means to us and how we use money. In the second week, we looked at love and money. So we had some amazing couples and singles on the show that talked about money and their relationships. This week, we're going to get into investing, and not just investing in stocks and real estate, 401k, but also in family, and then also looking at how God has invested in us and what we need to do to continue his message and investing in others. And then finally, next week, we're going to be looking and highlighting Black entrepreneurship. So I'm really excited for today. We have a great group of people. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm just going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Theo, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Theo Milford here. I think most people know me as a singer or something like that. But I'm also a passionate real estate investor. Got into real estate investing maybe about 7 years ago through a mentor of mine that poured into me, gave me an opportunity, and it's changed my life. And just willing to share it with all who will listen.
Great, thanks. Monique.
Hi, everyone. You probably have seen me like for the past 2 weeks as a moderator, so this is interesting. I finally get to talk unbiased. I am, I guess you can call it a baby investor, so I'm just willing to share what I have learned thus far, and hopefully it helps.
Great. And Jelani?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jelani Harry. I've been in the real estate investing game for probably about 4 years now, where I've been given the opportunity to share and to learn, and just using my skills in software development to advance my investing career.
Okay, awesome. So we've asked this question on the previous two panels, so I want to start out with this kind of general broad question. So where did you all get your financial knowledge and understanding of money from? Kind of just growing up and where that started. So Jelani, I'll start with you.
Got it. So my first understanding of money was when I started to go when I was in high school, and I was given an allowance. I was given $2 a day to go to school, and I had to make those $2 work, right? So I remember that I used to buy a drink and buy a sandwich, and that was it. But as I became a guy in high school, and you wanted to do a little bit more, I figured, that I'm going to take those $2 and do a little bit more with it, right? So in school, there were no ACs and stuff like that. And so I used to take my $2 and with a group of other friends, probably $10, we grabbed the $10 and went and got Capri Suns. And we used to freeze them overnight, come to school the next morning and sell them for like $1, right? And so that's kind of where I had my first idea about investing, and then we went into selling candy and stuff like that. And so that's kind of where I started, to be honest.
Okay, so you started with the little side hustle in school. I like it. Monique, how about you?
I started with my mom. She always told me that I was stingy because I like to spend other people's money, not mine. So she also gave me like an allowance. And I think in high school it was $20 a week, and I had to make that work. And then she would tell me like, oh, once you're 18, make sure you get a credit card so that you can buy a house. And that was like kind of just the basic financial knowledge that I got. And then it wasn't until college I actually went to this free financial workshop where it kind of changed everything, like, because I always wanted to do investing, but I didn't know about it and I was scared. So that kind of changed my life, but we can get into that later.
Theo?
So for me, I was always raised like Janani and Monique. I had an allowance, but we never had a whole lot. I mean, we were middle class income. Father was a preacher. So we kind of lived a decent life, but I always felt like there was more. I just didn't know how to get there. So it wasn't until getting into college and working through college that I saved, but didn't realize that saving itself isn't investing. It's it is profit if you keep it, but you got, if you can find a way to put it to work, then long term it will actually pay you to save that money. So I met a mentor of mine at Metro actually years ago that decided to essentially give me two books. It was The Millionaire Next Door and Rich Dad Poor Dad, and told me I needed to read those two books and to come to him with questions. And he had been an investor for many years. And so those two books really changed my whole viewpoint, because I was extremely risk averse up until then, holding on to everything. And then after that, working with him and him pouring into me, I started to take additional steps. And that's how it really got me growing.
Okay, great. So I just kind of want to throw this definition out there. This is something that I came across, so that we're kind of working on a broad definition of what investing is. So the definition that I found is: investing is taking a risk to entrust what you have to someone or something else with the expectation that it will return something greater. So with that, kind of how and why did you get into investing? Monique, I'll start with you.
I would say I got into investing just because I don't remember where I heard it from, but I remember being young and they were like, someone in my family made a comment saying that Black people are not rich because they don't invest. Like rich people invest their money and we're the only ones who just save it and we don't want to do anything with it. So I was like, I'm trying to be comfortable and financially independent. So I guess I just wanted to figure out what it was like. And yeah, nothing like concrete.
Okay, Jelani? You're still on mute. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Sorry, just remind me of the question one more time, the end part of the question.
So how and why did you get into investing?
Got it. So I got into investing because I realized that going to school, there's going to be a cap, and I'm not an individual that likes to be capped. And so I needed to understand, how do I increase my net worth by not working from 9 to 5? And the only way I realized that is by investing.
Okay, Theo?
For me, again, it goes back to this mentor of mine. I was young, married at the time, and he said, listen, if you could buy one house for each of your children in the future and just have that house continuously be paid off by somebody else living in it and paying you some cash flow every month, but while they're paying you, they're paying your mortgage down every month, then you don't have to be concerned about whether or not your children will get a scholarship to go to college, because in 20 years or 25 years or whatever, that house will be pretty much paid off if you do what you need to do. And ultimately, you'll have equity in that house to be able to borrow against to pay for college if your kids didn't get a scholarship. And that kind of got my mind going, hey, like I can have other people pay for assets, as well as reading that book, The Millionaire Next Door, opened my mind to the reality that each of the assets that I own could actually pay for things that I want. So that concept of letting the cash flow buy things instead of having to always try to hustle to save up this money to buy the thing was another thing that kind of really got me started. And that was all functional through that mentor of mine.
Wow. So you mentioned a lot of different things there. So I kind of want to, my next question is, like, what are some of these, investing or financial vehicles that you guys have used, and what have been some pros and cons? You talked about, Theo, basically having a house pay for itself, where you have an investment in it, but it's a very minimal investment, but it's working for you and it's going to be working for your kids and maybe their kids. So you're looking at things that kind of span generations, and it's not
Right.
just a one-time thing of, an instant amount of cash kind of deal. So can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of the different vehicles that you've used and how they've worked for you?
Sure. So for me, my primary vehicle is real estate investing. I do invest in the stock market through my 401k portfolio, but outside of that, my wife and I, our primary vehicle is through real estate investing. The goal for me primarily is to gain cash flow from assets, right? And the more I can gain cash flow and the more assets I can have doing that, is the more it can actually replace my income over time. So for me, it was coming up with what is called a freedom number. And that freedom number was essentially taking all of our expenses for a month in our household, and basically dividing that into a particular cash flow number that I needed to make off of, and that would tell me how many assets I needed to buy, giving me that much money to be able to not have to work. For me, that was primarily through the vehicle of real estate, with each asset paying me between $250 to $350 per asset. And that could be per door, right? So if you think about a multi-unit house, you may have 4 doors. If 4 doors are paying you $250, that's $1,000 of cash flow. That's after all expenses are paid, paying the mortgage, paying any utilities, anything that I'm responsible for. So that is just cash flow. Now, if you take that concept and extrapolate that out to 10 of those assets, that's $10,000, right? So now you say, all right, that's $10,000 of cash flow. What does that do for you in terms of replacing how much you actually need today or you plan on needing to operate your household? And that's the freedom number that drives what we do and where we're trying to go.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so that freedom number, Monique.
I just want to give a little bit of background to let people know where I'm coming from. So I just graduated college, like, what is it, 2 years now? Uh, mm, I think actually a year and a half ago. Let me not push it. And I am trying to get into the real estate, but to start off with investing, I started off with my IRA, which is my retirement account. So that was the first way that I got involved, like doing a Roth IRA. And for those who don't know, like that's basically where you put towards your retirement and you already pay taxes on the money. So when you're ready to take it out later, you don't have to pay taxes on it again. So I started with that. And the vehicle that I use robo advisors. So I know that for me, watching all these movies and hearing about investing, like I think of Wall Street, I think of people going crazy, watching like numbers fall every day and all of that stuff. And I was like, I don't have the time for that. I don't have the energy for all of that. So then I learned about robo advisors who basically it's like an app or whatever that based on your quiz that you take and it will invest money for you based on their recommendation. So that's a really passive way that I invest. And that's just for like those out there who are students and stuff.
Okay. So you're saying that as a student who recently graduated from undergrad, right? So, you're in your early 20s here, and already you've set yourself up and looking for your retirement and having a fund there, which I think is great, because a lot of times, when you're in your 20s, you're like, oh, retirement, that's not coming for another 40, 50 years. So you're not necessarily thinking about that, because of the general concept that we have around when you should retire in your 70s or 60s. But, as Theo mentioned earlier, talking about that freedom number. And so having this strategy will allow you to have that freedom earlier. So retirement could be 40, could be 50, because you've started so young. So Jelani, same question, kind of what financial vehicles and investment vehicles are you using, and what have been some of the pros and cons behind that?
Got it. So just like Theo, I am heavily involved in real estate. And that's one of the primary vehicles that I use for investing. Another one is small businesses. I do have a couple of small businesses, and the final is going to be a tech firm. So I'm a software developer. I've been one for about 10 years. And so obviously within the current state that we are in, things where we have to social distance, we kind of rely on technology like Zoom or YouTube, right? And so I'm trying to marry technology to whatever it's needed, wherever it's needed, right? So yeah, those are kind of my vehicles for investing. And it's kind of brought me to the understanding that, it's not always safe to have one vehicle, right? You should have more than one, because when that transmission stops working, you want to be able to hop into your next.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you are obviously not having all of your eggs in one basket, but not only are you investing, you're also shifting over into entrepreneurship, so that you have, you're investing in yourself, and that is then obviously going to be working for you exponentially as well, because you're not relying on somebody else for you to be able to do what it is that you need to do. That's great. So we've been talking about real estate investment, Roth IRA. So when we think about investing, obviously it's money, right? But I think a big fear is people saying, like, I don't have any money to invest. Some people are living literally paycheck to paycheck, or if they are lucky to have a 401k, that money is kind of already gone from their paycheck and they don't necessarily have to worry about it. But that's also a long-term strategy. They don't necessarily want to tap into that immediately. So if somebody is looking to get into investing, like, how do they really get started with little to no money? What are some things that you all have done, some strategies that you all have done to invest in real estate with using muted.
Advisors,
Thank you, robo advisors, in order to begin your investing journey. So with little to no money, how do you get into the game, Theo?
So there's three things that I personally have done. There's multiple options out there. One of the things that I always knew, because I was not from here originally, I'm from Jamaica, right? So when I came here, the biggest lesson I learned was like, you need to have legit credit. Like if you have great credit, you can do a lot. But what happened for me was I realized with good credit comes the ability to get like 0% credit cards, right? And for a whole year, you get 0% interest cards. So I've used those accounts to take the money out, cash out, and put it as a down payment. I've done that. I've used those accounts to fund renovations, and I've used those accounts to buy property. I mean, you get a $50,000 credit line, and you can write a check for $30,000 of it. You have two of those, and because you're studied, so your position. When on the flip side of it, how do you get your money out of a house is, remember, there's something called forced appreciation. So if you buy an undervalued asset, you increase its value by renovating it. Then ultimately, as long as your calculation is correct, when you appraise, you can appraise it up front, but when you go to refinance that house down the line, you get to pull all that money out and some in some cases if your numbers work out. And so with taking all that money back out, you pay your credit line back and you keep it moving. Another option is using other people's money. If you have a good business plan, then you could present a deal. Every deal has a dollar, and a good deal finds money. And so it's called other people's money, basically presenting a good deal and having other people basically fund it. Sometimes you have skin in the game, sometimes you don't.
I mean, I think everybody would love to have that, is using other people's money to to basically invest and increase the money in their pockets. So yeah, we'll definitely get back to that a little bit more. Jelani?
How do you invest with having little to no money? So other than the options given by Theo, what I've done is done a concept called wholesaling, where the idea is selling real estate or getting real estate for a number that is under what the market value is, and selling it to another investor or a retail buyer for what the market value is. I think it's going to take a little bit more to explain it in further detail, but basically if I go to a motivated seller, right, and say, or someone has a foreclosure or a tax lien, or someone has just died or going through a divorce and they have assets or properties, you call them and you say, hey, are you interested in selling your house? Yes, I'm interested in selling my house. What's the number? You give them a number, and if it's agreeable to them, then you put it on a contract. Your responsibility then is to make sure that you sell that contract for whatever dollar amount is comfortable for your profit, right? So if I get a contract for $10,000 and I know that it's valued at $20,000, I can sell it at $15,000 to somebody that is interested in buying it at $15,000 and make $5,000 without putting any cash up front.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll have to kind of, unpack that. I think, before the show, we were having an internal conversation, and, one of the things I was like, there's probably going to be a lot that, we don't understand, our viewers don't understand. So again, we're not experts in this, but the knowledge that we do have, we want to be able to put it into kind of layman's terms so that people can really follow along and be like, yes, that's definitely something that I want to get into. So I appreciate that, kind of expanded explanation of what wholesaling is and how it kind of begins. Monique, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what you've done for investing with little money?
Yeah, sure. So I have three things that I've done. So I love credit cards, and I only have cashback credit cards. So one thing I've been doing is I put all my bills on my credit card. So like at the end of the year, say I make like $100 or whatever, $200 on that cash back, I'll use that cash back to then invest. So another thing that I use, there's this app called Betterment, where you can start your Roth IRA with $10. So there's varying vehicles that cost different amounts to get started, but there are ones out there that start at like $5, $10. 500, 1,000, whatever it is. So finding that vehicle that starts lower. And then the other thing that I did was create a budget for it. So I literally planned, okay, every month I'm going to put a percentage towards this, whether it's $5, $10, whatever it is. And then say in a year, I'll have enough money to get started in a project that I really want to get started in.
So can you just talk a little bit about the credit cards? Because we know that that's a big area where people get caught up, and credit cards are one way of building good credit, obviously, so that, when you go in for a loan for a mortgage or other things, they look at kind of what is your credit. But a lot of people, especially in college or just coming out of college, they get caught up in that credit card debt fiasco, and it can ruin their credit, and it can ruin kind of how things are. So what are some strategies that you have implemented so that you didn't fall into kind of the pitfalls of having too many credit cards or credit cards with high interest that you didn't realize what it was and all of that?
So for me, the most important thing is having the app on your phone, and I check my credit card app daily. So it's like I always need to make sure I know what my balance is and what my credit line is. Like I always need to know that. So then I'll be like, maybe you don't need Chipotle today. You just spent like $30 yesterday. So that helps me to keep in check. And then also I pay off my entire balance like every month, just because I don't like whatever. I don't even know the interest rate on my card because I don't pay interest. So I was like, whatever it is, I'm gonna cry about it. I probably can't afford my Fashion Nova outfit, but I'm not gonna, go over. I'm just gonna pay it off.
Let me add to that, because we've been using that strategy. My wife and I have been using that strategy for years. We use our credit cards like debit cards. Honestly, we have our online budgeting tool that we use. I won't mention their name because they're not paying me for it. But basically, we have all our accounts linked to that, and every month we sit down, we plan our budget, and we buy everything on our credit. We pay every single thing on our credit. I pay my mortgage on my credit. Like if I keep paying my credit and it costs me 1%, I'm still paying it, because like Monique was saying, cashbacks, as well as, we take multiple trips where we don't even pay anything but a couple of dollars, maybe $10, sometimes none. Because of the cashback rewards and the different types of cards. For me, there's no such thing as too much credit. I love credit because I consider credit to be a debt weapon. In the event like with COVID-19, we got crap loads of credit that if something was supposed to happen, I'm swiping that card to stay afloat and keep my family eating, because I know I can, like Jelani said, use other vehicles to get cash to pay it back if I needed to. But our approach is to use it like our debit card. We run it as a budget, and so we pay it off every month, and it does build your credit very well.
Great. I think that's very helpful, because we don't want, again, like I said, disclaimer, we're not professionals here, we're not financial advisors or any of that sort of thing. So we're just really talking about like personal experiences and what has worked for everybody here. But kind of hearing that, it's great, because I think some people are afraid of like, I'm only going to have one credit card and it's going to be used for emergencies and things. So being able to do your research and understanding the value of the different credit cards, from points for flights and trips to cash back, but also being responsible in how you use that, and make sure that you are not carrying a balance, because some of these credit cards have like 25%, interest rate things, and you don't want people to get caught up with that. So
that's great. Responsible is the word. I definitely have to put that in there. Responsible. Just like, this is F.L.O.W, so we can keep it real. Like people out there that drink responsibly, you gotta use credit responsibly, right? Otherwise it will sink you. And so that's why our approach is to use the budget system, where it's like, if we were going to use a debit card, the same amount of money is what we transfer back to our credit card every month.
Nice.
Oh, another, just to add on, another method that I use, I never wait till the end of the month or the billing cycle to pay my credit card bill. Like usually as soon as I pay for something on it, I immediately pay off the bill, because I don't want to it gives me anxiety if I have too high of a credit card bill. So that's another thing that I use as well.
Nice. All right, so I'm going to go to YouTube. We have some questions coming in. So one of the questions is it valuable to hire a financial advisor? For some people, it is difficult for them to find people who are willing to walk them through all of this. So have you guys ever used a financial advisor? Would you advise in investing that money and that time in working with a financial advisor? Monique, I see you've got your hand raised.
My financial advisor is YouTube. She is free 99, and she's many financial advisors. This lady that I watch, she's amazing. She breaks it down to the simplest form, and I think that's my biggest advice because I don't feel like paying for things.
Okay. So just quickly too, just as a caveat, we're going to try and, capture all of the resources that are talked about here. So Monique, you talk about YouTube and you have, I'm sure, different people that you've used. So we're going to try and get all of this together that we can share on our Facebook or Instagram pages later on. So people can, they can go out and do the research for themselves. Theo, Jelani, financial advisors, helping people walk through this whole process.
Yeah, I've never used a financial advisor either. I'm a believing truth seeker, right? So if you're looking for the truth and you're looking in the right places, like maybe Google or YouTube, you'll find it, right? So if you're interested about financial literacy and you start to maybe go to the library, right? Or you go on Google and you type something, there's going to be enough information on there that you can be financially savvy, and just have the appropriate conversations with individuals who are of the same like mind to kind of take your situation and make it a little bit different. Because you can talk to a financial advisor, but there's a lot of individuals that just not to be trusted. Let's be honest, right? And so it's from you not understanding that field, understanding that market, you going into it blindly. You're looking for someone to take advantage of you. Right. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in, that happens all too often. Right. And so do the research, do some research, look online. And as you have questions that cannot be answered by YouTube, you document those things, get a little book, document your questions and find the truth and find the answer to your questions yourself.
Yeah.
It's my advice.
I agree. So my approach, I have had a financial advisor. And Jelani's right. It wasn't until I started to look at it for myself that I realized I really wasn't making no money. They were making good money. I had good looking returns, but at the end of the year, when their payments came out, it was like, bro, you might as well have just not done nothing with it. So my approach shifted to basically, like Jelani said and Monique, like looking at all the options that were available to teach me. YouTube is a powerful tool. I mean, they said if you spend 30,000 hours or whatever it is, or 10,000 hours, whatever the number is, doing the same thing or paying attention to it, you become an expert. So yeah, I think it's 10,000. So essentially, it's like I spent literally way more than 10,000 hours studying how to be successful at various real estate strategies through as many YouTube channels as I could. And that really, it opened my mind. And I did spend some money on, I paid attention to sales and bought courses when they were on sale. You know what I mean? Like, there's sales coming up, whichever holiday's coming up, all these gurus are going to have these legit sales. So like joints like $3,000 marked down to 400 or 200, like just buy it up at that price.
Right.
So I did that too. But yeah. And the last thing I wanted to say, one other option for people who think we don't have money to start is if you've ever changed jobs and your old job had an IRA or some kind of 401k, there is something called a self-directed IRA. You can actually roll over old 401ks into a self-directed IRA, which gives you the ability to use that money to invest to make it grow outside of another manager of that fund. So you can use that. I've used that as a tool to be able to buy properties. Now the profits don't come to me in that case, it's in the IRA, but it's a means of basically using that to do whatever you needed to do to roll that money over.
Nice. So, you and Jelani have really mentioned kind of real estate and different strategies in real estate for investing. Can you guys talk about, maybe 2 or 3 of the different strategies that you have implemented in real estate and how they've worked for you and how you got started in that, and kind of where you've seen what your vision or your strategy was and how you've seen that kind of go and change?
Cool. I mean, I can go first. So my mentor, I talk about a lot. I respect him highly, my Uncle Ed. Highly respected in my life. For me, the whole premise of cash flowing real estate was what drove me getting started. So I started with cash flowing real estate, but as I started to study, I also began to think, well, how can I actually buy property without having to pull all my money in there? And in that process, it led me to what is called owner financing real estate, which means you find an owner who will basically finance you buying the asset instead of you having to go to a bank. In some cases, I've bought houses that are worth $300,000 for less than 10 grand. And in other cases, I've bought houses that are worth that much or a little bit less for maybe 5 grand. It just depends who the owner is and what their motivation is. And then, like Jelani said, I got into wholesaling, not necessarily, I'm not a wholesaler, but I learned the strategy because there were houses that I would find as I did my research and continued to reach out to motivated sellers. I'd find houses that I wasn't interested in, but I needed to know how to basically help that seller. And while I helped that seller, I helped me. And so with wholesaling, like Jelani said, we lock it up under contract at a lower value than what that house could actually sell for. And then we assign that contract to a new end buyer who will pay us an assignment fee. And essentially you have no money tied up in the deal. You just move in paper. And so that strategy helped me to make rights on some bad real estate deals that I did in my early investing career and now.
Yeah, for me, as Theo mentioned, the real estate, wholesaling real estate, that's how I got introduced to it. That's how I got introduced to it. Exactly what he said is I came from a software development standpoint, and I got introduced to real estate by my buddy who was doing real estate for about 10 years. He had the ideas of wholesaling, buying and flipping. So he had a company that was responsible for purchasing, and then a company that was responsible for renovating properties, and then a property management company. And so where I played a role was helping him find deals, right? Because I had knowledge in software development, and saw how, I can use information that is public to find deals that other wholesalers did not necessarily know how to find, right? So access to databases and access to the tax assessor websites, and being able to pull all that information to a specific place or specific local DB that allowed me to then be able to funnel through that information, or me and our team to be able to funnel through that information to be able to get these wholesale deals to then wholesale opportunities to then present to the clients that we already had on board. So it's kind of like a PE fund that we had, but I was responsible. I was that wholesaler that was responsible for finding deals.
Okay.
And there were different ways of finding them, right? So if you want to further the conversation along, so probates are when individuals die, right? So for example, there's a lot of individuals that died via COVID-19, right? In certain counties, they list deaths. And so you can easily find that these individuals had assets that were assigned to their name, right? And so looking at that as an opportunity in which you can do real estate. Or an interesting strategy that I've come across was fires, right? There are fires that happen, right? Houses burn down. And typically when those houses burn down, they stay abandoned for some time. So just being on the radar as to knowing when a fire has occurred on a specific property, that to me indicates that there's a wholesale opportunity there for me to be able to talk to somebody to see if it's interested in selling, or things like tax liens and divorces and things like that.
Okay. Monique, I see you raised your hand.
Oh, I was just gonna throw out for those people who like just out of school. I'm kind of representing you guys over here. What I use is like I hope one day to get into like what Jelani and Theo are, hopefully soon. But for right now, I do like web stuff. So one of the real estate platforms I invest in is Fundrise. Jelani can kind of talk about what that is exactly. He explains it better than me. And also I get into buying REITs, which is like a real estate investment trust. So that's kind of like with the stocks and stuff, you're buying into real estate. So that I can do that from my couch. So that's my vehicle.
Okay. Jelani, can you explain a little bit about Fundrise, what Monique was saying?
So Fundrise is typically when you're investing into a firm that invests into real estate, right? So it's like an application that allows you to, from my understanding, put your money into real estate without having to physically deal with the real estate. So there's a firm that, like for example, my firm or Theo's firm that already deals with buying, rehabbing, renting, and getting cash flow and stuff like that. And we're looking for funds, or as people said, other individuals' funds. And Fundrise is a way of crowdfunding, right? Pulling a bunch of funds together to be able to get these returns and then kick back to these individuals. So it's like a modern stock market for real estate.
It's kind of like doing a GoFundMe for real estate in a way. And just to give you guys a little bit more information on it, it's like $500 to start investing. And they'll ask you, like, do you want to invest in stuff on the East Coast, West Coast, mid coast, Midwest, or whatever. And like, I just being honest with you guys, I didn't have like $500 just sitting down to invest. So because I did my research and I knew that was the amount, I like saved towards it, just how you would save towards a vacation or shoes or whatever. I was like, okay, I'm gonna save towards this, and then at this month when I have it, I'm gonna invest.
So Monique, you talked about $500. You talked about that we don't really need, or $5,000 or not that much money to invest. But can you guys talk a little bit about what are some of the returns on the investments that you're actually doing? I don't necessarily specifically want to get into all your financial business per se, but like when you're investing, obviously that the goal is to be able to increase. So what are some of the returns that we're looking at, and what is the time frame that we're looking at? Because when we talk about retirement, we know that that's going to be 20, 30, 40 years. But when we're talking about real estate investments, or maybe some of the stocks or robo advisors or things like that, kind of what are some of those returns on investments that we're looking at, and also just the general time frame for that? Theo?
So for me, it's deal per deal. Like if I'm wholesaling a deal, my return on investment is infinity because I have zero money in the deal. That means I find an undervalued asset, I list it for sale, I get it under contract, and then I try to sell it to somebody else. I put nothing in. Maybe I put $10 down as an EMD, which I never pay, but
sorry, EMD?
Earnest money deposit, I'm sorry. That means a security for that seller to say, hey, your contract is valid. But most of the times, as soon as we get a house under contract, if I'm wholesaling it, I'm going to find an end buyer who would put down the earnest money deposit with the title company, who will then close that deal out. So in that case, there's no money down from me, and I get a return. So my minimum return, sometimes 2,500, you could get 10,000, 15,000, could be more. It just depends on how much, what we call spread, the differences between what you lock that deal up under contract with and how much you sell it to another investor for. But in terms of cash flowing real estate, I'm looking at typically between 12 and 15%. Makes me happy per year of a return. And that means, for example, in Baltimore City, it's very easy to make $500-600 per month on a house. You buy the house, your mortgage payment's only $650. The rent's $1,300, right? You do the math. So ultimately, your returns are astronomical, especially if your repairs aren't that high. So from my perspective, I look at Baltimore City as a cash flow play, and then other areas like Prince George's County from an equity and appraised value position for now.
Okay. Jelani?
For me, when I'm looking at returns, I'm in the 20% range, a quarter. I try to, I'm very aggressive in terms of cap rates, right? So I'm not going to invest in something that's only going to give me 10% a year or 9% a year. You know what I'm saying? I typically do a lot of flips and stuff like that, and rental flips, and wholesale flips or wholetailing, which allows me to, flip my money very quickly, right? So if I start off with, call it $100,000, by Q1, I expect that $100,000 to be 120, right? So by the end of the year, that 100,000 needs to be 180. Where most investors, typically from anywhere between, as Theo said, at 12 to 15%, that's great. You're not getting that in the bank. You're not getting that typically in the stock market. Those are very numbers that attract a lot of individuals. But personally, because I deal in certain markets, I know that those numbers are way higher. And so I kind of try to hit those numbers as 20% a month, because I'm not necessarily, my vehicle and my strategy isn't always holding real estate, right? It's flipping cash. And so if I get $100,000, I want to make that 100,000, 120 in the first quarter and into 180.
Okay. So Monique, a question came in directly for you is, have you seen a return on investment in your Fundrise portfolio that you've done with that?
Yeah, so just disclaimer, my returns are definitely not going to be 100,000 right now because it's based off of what you're like, it's based off what you're investing. So I put a little bit each month into Fundrise. And just to give y'all an idea, I've had my account for less than a year and I've made like about $50 when it comes to dividends and appreciation with just my initial like 500. I think that's definitely less than 10%. But just to give you an idea.
And it sounds like, you put in a little money and it's working for you and you don't really have to do anything in terms of, obviously you monitor it, but it's not like every day you have to kind of work at it. So
right. It's very
easy.
It's like lazy like me.
I don't think it's lazy because if already at 20 something, if you're investing and you're looking at retirement and all this kind of stuff, you're definitely ahead of the game. All right, so I want to get into a couple more questions here from YouTube. So one, kind of like, what is your ultimate goal in strategy and investing, and how are you deploying that? And then how has COVID impacted your investment strategy, and how have you been able to deal with that and handle that? So that's the first question.
So for me, my long-term goal, honestly, is to leave a legacy for my kids and my family. Everything I do is for my wife and my kids and my extended family. And then I'm one of those guys. I'm always willing to share what I know, because when my mentor took a chance on me, it launched me into a new dimension. And so a long-term plan is just to leave that legacy. I want my kids not to have to start over like I did. I want them to have the right to be able to do what they want to do when they get older, rather than having to always follow the same pattern that I was pretty much forced to follow. And then how has COVID impacted things now? It's definitely caused me to pay closer attention to one, who I put in my assets, the type of tenants I look for, because a lot of tenants did take advantage of COVID-19 and stopped paying rent. I manage some assets for a couple of landlords that are just not doing very well because the caliber of tenants weren't necessarily honest tenants who would communicate. And so my whole strategy has been built upon holding more than I sell. So for every property that I flip, I hold one. And for every property I wholesale, I try to hold one. So my whole goal is to put good tenants in these properties to provide value to our community. I'm big on investing in Baltimore City, like I said, because I want to provide luxury houses to people who may not be able to afford that. And that's what I do. I put very good renovations in and put good tenants in good houses, and they've continued to pay their rent. So, I'm grateful.
Okay. Jelani, can you speak a little bit to kind of what is your ultimate goal and strategy, and has COVID had an impact on that?
Definitely. My ultimate goal is very aligned with Theo, right? So being Tony Adventist, you see a lot, right? So you see a lot of middle class, and you see a lot of individuals who are not too, financially savvy or, financially literate. And so my end goal is to share this information with all my loved ones and us elevate to that level where this information isn't something that is being shared on podcasts, but it's something that everyone knows, right? Everyone is, when they born, or when they become, go to high school or whatever the case might be, they know this. And my way of getting there right now is to continue to invest in real estate and use real estate and technology to really take it to that next level. As Monique's mentioned, Fundrise, I believe that's going to be the future of real estate. Everything is becoming remote, and I kind of saw that probably like 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, I saw that a little bit longer when, as a techie, we started changing books to digital books, and magazines to digital magazines, and now everything is becoming very digital. So COVID didn't necessarily impact my way of thinking, because I was already operating in that scenario, being, a techie. And so, I'm continuing to pushing that needle forward, investing, using digital platforms and things of the such to make life very easy so that, we're making money without having to necessarily go to work or do anything, but the computers and all that stuff kind of do a lot of things for us.
Okay, cool. Monique?
My ultimate goal is to live my best life. Um, like, I love going on vacation. I believe that God has this big, beautiful world that He made me to explore. So I want to do that and not worry about stuff. But on a serious note, I want to work not because I have to work. Like, I want to work because it's something that I'm passionate about doing, or it's something that I want to do is going to help other people, as opposed to, if I don't work, I can't eat, or I'm not going to have a house, or I'm not going to, whatever the case is. How COVID kind of changed my strategy? Not really. I've been using robo advisors from the jump, especially because, like, you could start out with no money, or like $10 or whatever the case is. And then it also helps me not to be really anal about like watching the stock market, because like for a second, COVID, like even my IRA kind of dropped, and I was just like, you know what, it's fine. Like, I have time to worry about that later. So I think me being more passive, it has helped me in that area.
Nice. So another question specifically about kind of buying and rental properties and that sort of thing. So would it be better to buy a house or several trailer homes, since they are cheaper in terms of renting?
I think everything boils down to what's your return that you're looking for. I mean, trailer homes return very well. You just need to know that market. I think anything you're getting into, you need to know the market. So for me, I started out in single family investing, and so I understand single family very well. Now I'm trying to move into multifamily investing, but I'm not going to do it at a large scale until I understand it. So for me, I'm okay starting with a 4-unit or a 3-unit. I'm not ready to jump into a 20-unit yet, right? So same way with trailer park, just learn it. If you're interested in it and the cash flows are there, it's certainly, the returns are there. It certainly is a good investment, but make sure you understand the ins and outs. What are you responsible for? What is your tenant responsible for? What are all the costs associated with owning a trailer versus the cost associated with owning an actual asset? And then ultimately think of real estate. If you're going to use real estate, think of real estate as a tool that can help you get to your ultimate goal. So if your driver is just to own assets, then you don't want to own a trailer park by itself. You actually want to own something that has much more value in itself, right? A trailer park might be a very good cash flow play. Depending on where it's located, it might have very good value depending on where it's located. So you want to be very clear on what's driving your initial goal when you think about, whether it's a house or a trailer park.
Jelani, do you have any thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with Theo. It's really up to personal preference, right, and what you understand. The mobile home market is a really good market to be in, and I've never tapped into it. I've heard about it, and I've heard the numbers are great, and it makes sense. It's just not something that I wish to direct my attention to. So it's like, it really depends. Like,
Yeah.
If you're interested in mobile homes, then do mobile homes, but single family homes can also potentially give you the same amount, same return. So it really depends.
Cool. All right, so I just want to remind our viewers out there to drop comments as we continue on in this discussion. Remember to share, like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as our IG page. Follow us there, as well as on Facebook also. So I want to pivot this conversation a little bit, because I've heard all of you talk about kind of leaving a legacy and sharing this with family members and with other people in the community. And so I guess my next question is, I feel like within our Black community, there's really a fear to taking risks and investing in the stock market. And, even in our 401ks, we don't necessarily fully understand what that is and how that works, or in real estate investment. Although we've seen, and you guys are a testament to this, to the successes that can happen because of these investments. So kind of, why do you think that is? And then what advice would you give to motivate people to kind of step outside of their comfort zone and take a leap and take those risks in this? Because, you know, as you guys talked about, legacy, generational wealth building, you know, not having to have your kids start from scratch and all of that. So why do we have so much risk? Why are we risk averse here?
I mean, one of the things that is true, specifically in our Black community, we definitely in our history have had to work a lot harder to be able to get to where we are, right, than many of our counterparts. And for that reason, I think it's harder to let go of what you've worked so hard for, as compared to someone who might be able to lose it all and replace it all because they just have better circumstances, right? And so I get that completely, but I think one of the things that we have to be careful of, and something that I've learned in my own journey here, is if you prepare yourself and educate yourself and you do things the way that you should be doing it, which is based on what other people have said to do, which they've already learned the mistakes, and you don't have to repeat the mistakes, then ultimately you can save yourself a lot of the heartburn. And so for me, I've made a lot of mistakes, and primarily because I failed to ask. My mentor was always willing to give me insight, but sometimes I felt like I can figure this out. I'm good. And when I went that route, like right now, I mean, I'm in a lawsuit having to sue somebody because I did a loan the way I told everybody else that they shouldn't be doing it, but I did it because I felt like, yeah, maybe it's my boy, he'll take care of me. But if I did it by the book, I wouldn't have to be suing him right now, right? So I think, always recognizing that people are willing to help if you're willing to ask a question. And that should help take away the fear of, educate yourself, ask a question. That should help take away the fear of, like, yo, I can actually do this,
I would say, I know, like, when I started out, I actually had to wait till I was finished with college due to like FAFSA and everything. And then my mom was super scared. She's like, I don't know what they do with the money in the stock market. Like, they take it and do whatever they want with it. So that's what I was kind of grown on, or raised on. Now, what is that proper English? Oh, but either way, I think education, just learning, like, I think Diana asked me to drop a name. So Miss Be Helpful on YouTube, I watch her. Um, and she kind of broke down, for example, the stock market in layman terms for me to understand, to the point where I could like kind of explain it to other people. So education is the biggest thing. And also just looking at it in terms of a long-term goal. Like with investing, most times you're not going to see the profit tomorrow. Like if you invest today, you're not going to see tomorrow. So just knowing that it's a long-term game.
Jelani?
I want to make sure that I'm answering the question correctly. The question is, why do our people, why are our communities so risk averse?
Yep.
It's trust. I think it boils down to trust. As to kind of combine what Monique and Theo said, we had to work harder, right? So we worked all our way up for 30 years. We have all this money, and we don't necessarily trust somebody to allow us to take that risk, right? So I believe that it's a double-edged sword, right? So individuals like us who have the knowledge, I think we have been given the task by God to spread it. And to spread it to the individuals that don't know, right? And it's also their duty to want to seek the information, right? I can't tell you something that you're not interested in seeking or interested in learning, right? And so I think that's why we are where we are, because there's a lack of trust, right? And for many reasons. So we have to break that barrier, that trust barrier, right? From our families, from our friends, we have to show them like, hey, this is the way to do it, or whatever the case might be. And as more of us step into this realm, right? More individuals will learn, and more individuals will seek the knowledge. They'll now begin to trust because, as Monique, you said with your mom, right? I don't know what they take your money and do with it, right? She doesn't, right? But as you probably team up with, call it your cousin or your brother or your sister, they're seeing what you do with it, so they kind of are a little bit more lenient to actually step into investing with you, or step into the idea of financial literacy or financial wealth, or wealth for generations and things like that. It's really a trust game, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's why we're stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys all hit on some key points there in terms of trust and just knowledge and or lack of knowledge for certain things.
And just to add, the other part too is that they don't teach us these things in school. I mean, honestly, if you think about like, oh yeah, so I went to college, I went to grad school, I get it. But the truth is, the standard of society is that you go through school to get a job. And that's our community's approach a lot of the times too. It's like, yo, go get yourself a good government job if you can. That's even better, right? You got job security. Don't try to entrepreneur, don't try to be an entrepreneur. That joint's going to sink you. Don't take that risk. Just do it the safe way. And then in 30 years, you can retire on $1 million. Like that doesn't work, but that's kind of what we've been taught. And so I think that shift in our mindset, like Jelani was saying, of now trusting and learning and educating ourselves, like Monique was saying, helps us to be able to take some of those risks now while we're young, because ultimately, if you figure it out now, you get the reward later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I also want to add, like, as Chandra said before, we're not financial advisors or experts or anything like that. It's like at every point we learn something new. Like today, I learned about a whole bunch of new real estate stuff. So it was just a day at a time. Like you learn one thing, you learn about like online banking, you learn about robo advisors, you learn about this, that, and the third. So it's just a continual learning process.
So with that, in terms of, Theo and Jelani, I know you guys are actually doing like physical kind of real estate investment deals in different communities. And Monique, you're taking kind of more of the passive side of things with Fundrise and robo advisors and everything. But like, how do you see those investments paying dividends? And real estate obviously is one of the main ways that we can kind of give back and invest in our communities. And especially with, Jelani, I know you're in New York, Theo, you're here in the DMV area, Monique as well. But like, obviously we see gentrification happening. And so that the lack of affordability in terms of housing being available for our people and in our communities, but that's one of the main ways that we can invest in our communities and doing that. So I guess, how are you guys doing that through your strategies? And how do you see that paying dividends to be able to provide those means for people? I know, Theo, you spoke directly to that a little bit earlier. So I kind of want to tap into that.
So yeah, for me, I think, like you said, gentrification is real. I went to Howard back in the days, 14, 15 years ago when, you couldn't drive up and down Georgia Avenue, walk up and down Georgia Avenue and be safe. And now, shoot, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, man, people walking their dogs. It's a different life, right? So for me, going to Howard at that time and realizing that the same house I lived in then might have been worth $250 is now forced appreciated up to $1 million in its current condition, or maybe 800,000, and it's not yet renovated. It really caused me to think, like, how can I bring value to my own community when my own community is being forced out of the place that they knew to be home? And so that's one of the reasons that took my wife and I into Baltimore City. We do own property down in Prince George's County. That's more for an appreciation play. But in Baltimore City, our strategy is to provide quality housing, not that slumlord behavior of just throwing up walls and saying, here's a house, but to provide very quality housing so we can attract quality tenants that want to live the American dream, but may not be able to afford it as a homeowner today. And a lot of my assets I sell on lease options. So I do rent to owns, and I get tenant buyers who want to clean up their credit and they want to live in a house that they want to own. And we give them as much time as they need to qualify. And so in that way, I think we're building and providing value to our community, where we're taking a risk on people that traditional landlords would say, nah, your credit score is 500, I'm not taking you. But for me, I'm looking at it a little bit more deeply and not doing it riskily, but trying to make sure that we approach it so that we're protected and our tenant buyers do what they're supposed to do.
Jelani, can you speak a little to that? I know that you had you're from New York, but I know that you've been doing some stuff down in the South, and I guess kind of what have you seen there, and how has
it's the same. So I definitely in New York, gentrification is a big thing. It's a huge thing. It's an uncomfortable thing sometimes because, as you said, it's a system. It's an entire system that allows us to be wrapped into this slavery mentality. in slavery type of living forever. And so what I've envisioned is that we should start building up these communities to very quality communities. Because the only reason we're interested in leaving these communities is because, the people over there have these things and we want those things. And so we try to get our money up to go get those things, right? Instead of getting our money up and building those things here and allowing us to be self-sufficient, right? We take our Black excellent dollars and we move out of the Black neighborhoods and move into neighborhoods that are predominantly white. I can attest to that, and I've done that. But I've had a change. I don't necessarily feel comfortable living around, I like to live around Black people, right? And so what I realized is that the only way to do that and live the way I want to live is by affecting change from what I know, right? I'm responsible now. That's how I see it. I've been given a task and I'm responsible for what I know to change the dynamic of individuals who are suffering. And so my idea is very similar to Theo's, building up our communities, not with only housing, but with stores, with businesses that our community necessarily needs to be self-sufficient, to give us the quality of life that we deserve.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, Theo, you talked about, Georgia Avenue, and I'm thinking more even just recently in the last 5 years, the H Street corridor in DC, and it was the same thing. And it was, I knew people that used to live in that neighborhood and in Trinidad even before, and they were asking for, everything that is there now. They were asking for grocery stores. I mean, DC has a lot of food. There's still a number of food deserts in the city. And so people were asking for grocery stores, they're asking for pharmacies, they're asking for, just everything besides just your Popeyes and your liquor store. And it didn't come. And so values went down, and, people ended up moving in different places. And you have these developers that come in and swoop up at, pennies on the dollar. And you have now a Whole Foods, a Giant, a Safeway, all within like 2 blocks. And you're like, wait a minute, people were asking for this for years. So, I love the strategies that you guys are doing right now on the smaller scale, but as you work and as you grow and, as this message kind of gets out there, and hopefully there's a lot of, Jelani's and Monique's and Theo's sprinkled throughout the United States that are really doing the same thing so that we can affect and implement change, so that we don't see our communities being devastated in the way that gentrification is happening. Because yes, we all want economic development, but we want equitable economic development so that we can kind of continue to see people flourish. So before I jump into the other questions, I just want to continue to let our viewers know that if you want to join us, if you have any questions, please drop your questions and comments in there, but also in the overflow, where we have an opportunity for people to log in and really be a part of this conversation. So if you want to join the overflow, email us at twoflowpresents@gmail.com. I think the link should also be just dropped in the comment box on YouTube. But we would love to have our viewers kind of come on and talk about investment strategies that they have had or questions that they've had, really in all of this. Jelani, I saw your hand up. I didn't know if you wanted to make another comment before we kind of.
No, that's fine. I think you hit exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, awesome. So before we kind of pivot a little bit more, I know you guys have mentioned some websites, some books that you've had, but what are maybe your top 3 resources that you have found to be the most helpful in terms of the whole investment strategy that you've begun to implement, or this investment lifestyle?
So for me, I know, and this might be other people too, but Bigger Pockets is a powerful tool, especially for young investors or people who they want to get involved in real estate, but just are afraid to. One of the things that I found years ago, a colleague of mine, he had been pushing Bigger Pockets even before I even knew what it really was. And what I found in Bigger Pockets was just a community of people who were just regular people, man. Some were just teachers, some were just car salesmen, some were just regular people. I kept thinking you had to be a millionaire to do real estate. And it wasn't until I realized that there are regular people out there who are just taking the risk, being educated and taking the risk on themselves. to do this thing that are really making a difference for their family and for their lineage. And so I would say Bigger Pockets. I bat with my boy Robert Kiyosaki as it relates to Rich Dad Poor Dad. Don't necessarily agree with some of his most recent comments, but that book is a to me, I think it's a very important book for anybody who wants to understand how to set yourself apart as it relates to being on the right side of history. I think we've been always trained to think of ourselves as employees and being self-employed, but it's not until you switch over to being the investor or the business owner that you really get to live the life that we see all the other people living, and we want to be able to help people behind us as well live that life. So that book was one, and then lastly, I think YouTube, man. Like YouTube University is straight up the best gift to our generation. I literally can tell you, I walked my first owner financing deal through YouTube. I never went to a course, never paid any dollars. It was one guy who was on YouTube who was just spitting the real truth, and I followed it to a T, and it worked. It's like it worked. So I think we can't diminish that right there. YouTube is the greatest gift to our generation, and anything you want, it's right there on YouTube.
So we're definitely going to have to try and get that link to that guy that you used for that owner finance so that we can share that with everybody. Because yeah. Jelani, Monique.
So some of the resources that I use, definitely Bigger Pockets, biggerpockets.com. When I started, I was heavy on that to understand what wholesaling was, understanding what cap rates were, ROIs, NOIs, all those things. All of those things. So Bigger Pockets was definitely a tool that I used heavily. There's another website that is a gem that is called opendata.com. Opendata.com allows you to tap into any state or any county in the US. That allows you to see information on a lot of different things. And so if you are a savvy investor, take a look at that site. And use the information that is given to be able to find these leads and find these deals very easily. So that's one. And then, just different apps. There's a bunch of different apps that's coming out. Deal Check, Deal Engine, PropStream, a lot of different apps like that allow for real estate investing to be a lot simpler through apps. So those are the resources that I would recommend if you are trying to get involved in real estate. Definitely Bigger Pockets, because that's going to be your Google for real estate. It's going to give you all the information you need. And then once you know enough, then you'll be able to use those other tools that I just gave, like OpenData and PropStream, to be able to do some very interesting things. Those are the things that I use right now.
Okay. Monique?
I actually kind of solely use YouTube, to be honest with you. I have a few people that I watch, mostly because they look like me, and it's like inspiring to see that the people who look like you can, progress and stuff. So I could just share those. One of the ladies I follow, her name is Miss Be Helpful, like MISS Be Helpful. It's all one word. And also, just a disclaimer, I don't only do like investing, I do financial health in general. So like how to save properly, how to maximize and just make your money work for you. Another person I follow is Poised by Finance. She also talks about a lot of things, and they break it down to like the most beginner, simplest level. So that's more for people who are just getting started. I also have a YouTube channel, which I talk about finances a little bit. So you can follow me.
That's nice.
But those are my biggest things. And then also, like, for example, when I was learning about Fundrise, and I would go on their website, I'm like reading it, I'm like, I don't need half the stuff I didn't understand fully, right? And who did I have to ask about it? I would go on YouTube and search Fundrise reviews and like listen to people break it down, like several people, and see their input and stuff like that, and then decide what I wanted to do.
Okay, cool. All right, so I want to, in our last little bit before we jump into the overflow for a couple of minutes, I just want to pivot again and really just talk about kind of the spiritual aspect of all of this. You know, as young Christians and Seventh-day Adventists, I'm sure you all know the parables in Matthew and Luke about the talents and the master that entrusted the talents to his servants. And so oftentimes when they talk about this, they talk about it in the context of, you know, your own personal gifts and not burying your gifts and making sure that the world kind of sees your gifts and everything. But talents were literally a unit of money. And so the master was expecting a return on his investment from his servants that he entrusted this money to. So in essence, he was looking for them to be faithful and good stewards. And so there's, you know, several different stories in the Bible where it talks about investing and it talks about, you know, what the tax collectors should do or shouldn't do and how we should be using and treating our money and tithing and the storehouse and all of that. So my question is, why then as Christians, you know, do we find it so hard to be transparent and talk about money, talk about finances, talk about investing in general? And then also specifically to be able to talk about this on the Sabbath, why is it seen as being taboo? Because as Christians, if we're supposed to be disciples and we're supposed to be furthering the kingdom, how do we do that if we don't have the resources? And if we don't have the knowledge and we're not able to exchange and have these kind of conversations, you know, how do we continue to grow what God has entrusted us with? So open to anybody that kind of wants to tackle this first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
My God.
So I think it's the lie of the enemy, honestly, especially as it relates to believers. The Bible is clear. The Father wants us to be the lenders and not the borrowers. Okay, this is the principle of God for his people, was that we should not be in a position of subservience, but we should be in a position of always leading the charge. Now, for some strange reason, we've taken the text that says the love of money is the root of all evil, and for that reason, it's caused us to fear what having money can do, not just for our people, but for our community, which ultimately is how we can serve him and be the hands and feet of Christ. And so for that reason, I think we need to go back and really look at what God has given us authority over. And when you go back to Genesis, I think it's clear that God gave Adam the authority over all of creation, right? That was Adam's command, was Adam and Eve, all of this that I've created along with my son is for you guys to have dominion over it. And that dominion has been lost because of sin. And because of sin, we, especially as believers, have been taking the back seat on where we should be leading. I think we should have the strongest banks. We should have the strongest financial institutions to be able to be on the front lines in this COVID time, rather than, you know, going to the government. Like, the church has everything it needs, but we've been on the back line thinking that we got to serve another master. So I think we got to reshape our thinking. And I think we need to recognize that God has given us the authority to be the lender, not the borrower, and let that drive our decisions.
I think that there is this implicit thought that we can only have faith in God when we're struggling. And I think that's something that's not said, but it's almost like you can really only trust on God to provide for you when you don't have the minimum, so that's how, like, he's going to show his blessings to you. I don't know why, but that's like the kind of message that I've gotten going to church. No one has said that explicitly, but that's kind of the theme that I see. And my thinking on it was like, to me, once you pay your tithes and you return to God what he gave to you, he's going to provide. So even like with investing, that's what helped me to be less risk averse in knowing that at the end of the day, I'm not going to take all my money and just like invest it and throw it away. But it's like, I will still be taken care of, even if I take a portion and try to make it grow.
Jelani?
Trying to remember the question. Why is it a taboo topic to talk about money on the Sabbath? Or
that, but then also why as Christians don't we talk about it enough, you know, and when we're given a very clear guidebook as to how we're supposed to be stewards with what God
talking about Christians, or are we talking about Seventh-day Adventists?
Christians, Seventh-day Adventists, both.
I think that it is an education, right? It's education in a combination of different things. The lack of education, and then tradition, and then systematic oppression, even within the church, that allows us to not talk about these things to grow.
Okay. All right, so Monique, you talked about, obviously like the tithe aspect, and the tithe can be seen as kind of like our financial buy-in, our return on investment to what God, has blessed us with. So what are other ways that you are returning God's investment besides just your tithe and your offering? And how are you doing that so that you personally can become, the head and not the tail? And as Theo was talking about earlier, the lender and not the borrower.
So for us, my wife and I, our whole strategy is, again, how can we bring value? How can we be of service? I mean, the greatest blessing for me is when I'm able to save a family from foreclosure. Yeah, clearly I'm buying their house, but now they don't have a foreclosure on their record, which then prohibits them from being able to possibly go and get a rental property or, apply for another place, right? Because a lot of landlords are looking at foreclosures and saying, hey, you're not good with your money, right? And that's not necessarily true. But for us, it's like when I can save a single mom from losing her house to foreclosure and helping her build her credit by continuing to pay her mortgage on her behalf every month that I own the house going forward. It builds her credit because the loan's not in my name. Again, using that owner financing strategy, that's how I think I'm bringing value. When I'm sitting across from the table at closing and she's crying and saying, man, thank you so much for, giving us some moving money or taking care of what we need to take care of, because otherwise we were about to lose it to short sale. Like that's when I think we're bringing value. And then ultimately for me, because we're in the inner city, doing a lot of our investments, it's to provide good quality home ownership opportunities to people who are just like you and I, who may not have had the luck of going through college, but are still hardworking people, and sharing the love of Christ with them as I go through the interview process and using my God-given discernment, along with my God-given common sense, to be able to judge who is right from who's wrong as it relates to leasing them the asset. I've found a very good experience just walking through that and showing people that, like, God is for you. And this is why we're able to do this, even though everything else didn't line up. You don't have great credit, but we're willing to take a chance on you. That's another means of me using this vehicle to spread the gospel.
Okay.
For me, I would say my biggest thing is education. Like every time I learn something, I want to share it, like not just keep it to myself and be like, ha ha ha, I'm going to get wealth, but just being able to share with other people, whether it's my friends or people who show an interest in money or whatever the case is, just sharing that information with them so that they could also gain as well.
Okay, great. Jelani?
I think my views are very, very aligned with Monique and Theo. Just being able to share the information as it comes in. As I said, it's been God has given me this knowledge and it's this responsibility to go ahead and share it as best I can to the world at large, everyone that.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to jump into the overflow. So this is an opportunity for everybody that has been kind of on YouTube and watching to kind of join in the conversation for our last 10, 12 minutes here. All right. All right. So who else do we have that's joining?
Hey everyone. Excuse me. Sorry, it's Rob here.
All right, thanks for joining. Go ahead.
I actually appreciate all the things that you all shared. What I guess would like to speak to or question you all on is, how did you manage the naysayers or the thoughts? I'm sure it's very clinical of me. Maybe you were inherently a risk taker, but how do you manage breaking the cultural norms around finances that I believe Chandra asked towards the end of that? When you have church members looking at you or family members or people around you saying, oh, I don't know, that's risky going into finance. And, the only sure money you have is the money in your pocket or in the bank account. And so I'd like to maybe hear your process, if there was any, or any real struggle you had about getting from that place to where you are now, sharing with us the wealth of knowledge that you have.
I'll go first on that.
Go ahead.
So personally, I'm not an individual that no one, I don't get bothered by people, right? So if someone is telling me to do something that's contrary to what I want to do, I don't tend to listen to them, right? Negative energy, I kind of block it as best as possible. So anything that's negative, I make sure that I keep it to the distance. So if anyone is having a problem with those naysayers or individuals that are trying to dim your light, move in the opposite direction. It's as simple as that, in my opinion.
Thanks for sharing that.
For me, I honestly had to learn to not tell people certain things until I did it. Like I just bought a house and I didn't tell people were upset with me because I didn't say anything until I did. But I knew fully well that it was gonna be, you're not ready, you're this, what about that? What about who, ha 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 ha. And it's like sometimes you just gotta pray about it, do your research, do it, and then people are always gonna be naysayers till you succeed in it. Then they're gonna be your supporter. So
Appreciate you sharing that, Monique.
Yeah, in my case, I'm grateful for my wife, Dr. Mel, who she's really allowed me to take some risks. Some of which, like I said, man, with every lesson you learn, right? And sometimes it was a tough lesson. And I grew up in a household where my mom was like, "Yo, nah, that's too risky for real," right? So I grew up pretty risk averse. Real estate requires you're relaxing that. You're gonna get into uncertain things. There's uncertainties, right? It's just what it is. And so my wife, because that's when our journey started, was as a couple. It didn't start before. I was saving money but never investing. And so when we got married, my wife really helped to, at least, I guess, even when she was uneasy, trust my wisdom. And in some cases, like I said, it's worked. In some cases, I failed, but then it's pushed me to find another way to right my wrong, right? So meaning I found another way to make that money back if I ever lost it. And so she's trusted me, and I'm grateful for that because it motivates me to keep trying.
Another point to answer your question, Rob. One thing that was really important for me, because I was also very risk averse, is making sure that my necessities are good first. Like before I get started in investing in anything, making sure that I'm contributing something to my savings, that my bills are paid. And the money that I tend to invest, or when I started out, was instead of buying a new wig or instead of going out to eat 10 times for the week, I would say, all right, I'm gonna take a portion of that and then invest. So that was my way of kind of making sure that I wasn't throwing away all my money. Like my necessities were good first, and then I would take my play money, I guess you would say, or like my take care of myself money and invest.
I thank you all for answering that. I say that, I think I said commented last week, money's not my industry. It's not my ministry either. But I will say I am partnered with somebody who is looking to be wiser with her money approaches. And so listening to you all, I feel comfortable because I probably would have been a naysayer, like, I'm not too sure. But I like what you all have said. It feels practical. It seems approachable and accessible for someone like myself, who money always seems large and overwhelming. And not because I have the same thoughts as maybe some of the generation before us about it being evil or all these different things. I think it could be a tool. Just for me, it seems like, where do you start, right? How do you go from not having anything to investing in multiple? So everything you all have said has been very helpful to me. So I want to share that and thank you all. And also add, just knowing, Theo, you really settled on my spirit, this idea of, because I love helping people. But I think it was my wife that said to me one day, like, but if you don't got any money, how you gonna help them? And I was like, oh, well, that's real. Okay, cool. So just listening to you all and listening to the way you've gone about it and the impact that you have had so far. And Jelani, you mentioned it a little bit as well, actually motivates me even more to be like, okay, yeah, that's something I can do, right? Like I can maybe get a rec center, whatever the case may be, but don't be afraid of it as long as I'm being, knowledgeable and careful with that. So I really want to thank you all for that. Appreciate it.
Alexia, thanks for joining us. Do you have any?
Hi guys, this panel was great. I learned a lot, kind of reinforced some of the things that I'm doing already. But specifically to me, when Theo talked about and Rob maybe I think talked about the fear part of it. That's something I'm struggling with, and so I may invest like small investments in stocks or whatever the case is, but to do any kind of big risk, I'm still working on that. So thank you guys. But there was one question in the YouTube that didn't get to ask, and I don't want the person to be mad at us. The person did ask, is it smarter to buy a house or rent since they're cheaper, or tailor homes, if I'm not mistaken, since they're cheaper? So I don't know who can answer that question.
Oh, I think, yeah, we did touch on that, on the trailer homes, of whether it is, and I think, they kind of mentioned just depending on what your strategy is and what's the best way of going about it. So just in terms of researching if it makes the most sense for what your overall goal is,
Okay.
looking at whether to do kind of trailer homes and in trailer parks versus multi-unit homes or multi-unit buildings or single family homes. So yeah, cool. I see Bari just joined. You have a question? You're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me
I
now?
heard Barry was on
Yeah,
there
can
because
hear you.
I know this is real. There's another
Yep.
man right here.
Hey, Rob, what's up, man? Nice to see you guys.
Good. So did you have a question or a comment that you wanted to kind of throw out to the panelists, or just kind of add in the whole investment conversation?
More like a general comment, and something that I have noticed in my 15-year plus that I've been in this country is that I think Tia was talking about it earlier, how most of us, or most of our generation and most of our skin color doesn't talk about investment a lot, or it's not something that we have folks or parents that actually start implementing or putting that idea into our heads when we start growing up. I know personally when I came into this country, my uncle actually, hey, this is something that you got to do plus your 9 to 5. Once you start making money, you have to put some money aside. You have to start looking at long-term ideas like property, buying something that you can easily turn and make profit on. So just maybe let's talk about if we can share some more light. Why is it that our skin color, our people sometimes struggle with that idea? We very instant gratification. We have $200-300. We want to buy the new latest Jordans or something like that. We don't think about maybe how can we increase that $200 or $300.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, it starts with us actually being willing to share. I remember when I first came here, it was 15 years ago too. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who's been here like 30 years before me. And his whole thing was, well, I had to come and hustle, figure it out. You got to figure it out too, right? And it was kind of disheartening, because the truth is that kind of mentality will always keep us in bondage. I think if we realize that what helps us help each other is that we're willing to share, then that means the next person can become another value add in the society, and the next person that they share it with becomes another value add, and soon we look back and we've just duplicated and quadrupled and multiplied ourselves thousands times over, because we were willing to give other people a stepping stool rather than having them build the whole stool itself from scratch. So I think, it starts with us having these kind of conversations and asking questions of us, and being willing to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like I tell all my colleagues of mine, like, I make mistakes, man. I've made a bunch of mistakes even recently. And so with every mistake you make, document it so that you don't make it again, and keep moving forward. But that should never stop us from going back and figuring out how to do it better the next time.
Yeah, one thing that I've always heard and learned is that it's okay to fail, but you want to fail early and you want to fail fast so that you can get back up and just kind of keep moving. And it's true. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Between everybody that's been on this panel today and all of the resources that are out there from YouTube, the information is out there. It's just a matter of taking that kind of first step of doing it and reaching out to people who have some knowledge or that are willing to be a mentor, to take the time to kind of walk you through some of the things that they've learned and where they went wrong, so that you don't necessarily have to kind of do that next misstep. But it's really on us to kind of continue to pay it forward to not only our family members and our friends and community, but to others, as Theo and Jelani and Monique, as you guys are doing through your investments and working with families that might be struggling, to be able to help them preserve their credit so that when they get to that certain level, because of the investment that you're doing, that's not only helping you, but it's helping them in return, they can then also do the same for themselves and for their future generations. So, just kind of as we wrap up here, I just want to thank you all for joining us and just really go around, the virtual room and see if there are any kind of final comments before we ask, everybody here to make a very smart and safe investment in our F.L.O.W t-shirt. But Monique, I'll start with you. Do you have any final comments as we wrap up here?
Yeah, if you are new to investing, if you want to get started and you don't have any money to do it right now, make a fund for it. So literally, if you want to open up another bank account and put money towards it every month, whether it's $10, $100, whatever it is, you can get started by doing that.
Jelani?
I would say with anything that you have going on, the Bible says, write a vision, make it plain that they may walk in that way. So write it down and execute against it.
Awesome. Theo?
Yeah, I would say basically, have a plan, just like Jelani was saying, and have a budget. I don't think any successful business can operate without those two things. You got to write it down. You have to have a mission, a goal, a plan, but you also have to have control over the cash flow, so that ultimately, when you look back, you are going towards a goal that will meet the needs and the desires for what your plan is. Otherwise, you'll possibly just keep shooting in the breeze.
Very good. Well, thank you all so much. So just before we kind of sign off here, I want to really highlight our F.L.O.W t-shirt here. As you guys can see, it's a wonderful design that was done by Rob. So we here at F.L.O.W, which stands for Fellowship, Love, Outreach, and Worship, we have these t-shirts. They are $20. For more information, you can email toflowpresents@gmail.com. The purchase of this t-shirt is actually, and part of our mission is we're doing outreach. And so the proceeds from this t-shirt are going to go to a snack drive that we're doing with local schools here in the community. So because of COVID, all of the kids pretty much are doing school online and staying home. And so many of the schools used to provide lunch programs and other such things. And so because some of that is now missing, we're trying to fill that need and fill that gap through our kind of snack initiative here at F.L.O.W. So this is one way that you can invest wisely. As I said, the t-shirt is $20. It's dope. To support our ministry, which in turn is supporting how we're investing in our community through our snack program with local schools. So thank you all so much for joining us this week. Next week, we'll be highlighting Black entrepreneurship. So looking forward to seeing everybody next week, 4:30 on Saturday, the 22nd. All right. Thanks, everybody.